I want to tell you another story about another young person from the other side of the world right now. I have other photos of it, but I was reluctant to show them to you because they're so horrendous. Let me tell you what happened to her rather than show you the pictures. Her family, living in a peasant village east of Chengdu, China, by about 12 hours on a bus, was sold as kerosene gasoline. She went to light the evening lantern. It blew up and engulfed her total lower body in flame. In trying to get her dress off before she passed out, all 10 of her digits were burned off, and she was horribly burned below the waist. She was brought to a medical clinic in China, and I've been in so many of these rural clinics, and it was impossible for me to believe how she lived through it without dying of infection. She spent 30 days there and went through all of the vagaries of burn therapy, which, as we all know, is a pretty horrendous thing to do. But because her family were peasants, they did not have the money in order to pay for medication, like painkillers. And so she endured these treatments, including skin stripping, for 30 days without any medication whatsoever. 6 months later, she was seen in this condition in Beijing. She had made her way with her mother to Beijing, and she was outside of a high-rise building, and she was not begging, but she was asking for help. And a wonderful woman by the name of Brecken Swartz, who was fluent in Mandarin and a graduate of Harvard, a PhD, and a wonderful person working in the communications industry in China, was going to work that morning, and she stopped and she saw this young girl in this condition asking for help. And Brecken told me that she, like myself, fell in love with this young girl the minute she saw her. She went up to her offices in the high-rise on the top floor. She quit her job, went back down, told the mother and daughter that she would be of help to her, returned to America, and got the child a compassionate visa. She came to Boston Shriners Hospital, where she had 13 operations, including the amputation of both legs at the knee. And she went through some terribly difficult surgeries. My wife and I learned about this, and instead of reading an article in the newspaper and kind of filing it as some mental process and then forgetting about it a few days later, one of the only differences between my wife and myself is, and maybe most other people, is that we take action. And so through a series of phone calls, I found Brecken, found Xiaolin, and told them that we would be of help to them. We have a tradition. We have 7 grandchildren, and every time one gets 10, we go to Washington, D.C. and spend a week one-on-one with that grandchild. And so Xiaolin is now living just outside of Washington, D.C. And so we asked if we could meet her and take her on a tour of Washington, D.C. with us. And we did. And we spent the whole day touring Washington, D.C., had dinner, and then that evening we had 2 hours in the White House. And we were the only people in the White House besides the security, the stewards, the president, and his wife. And she navigated the White House for an hour and a half on her prosthesis. And then finally, for the last half hour, got tired. And she had to ask for her chair. And the person who gave us the trip through the White House and who was involved in security was so touched by her courage and by her resolve to be a well and viable and functioning human being that he went into the president's quarters, got a beautiful long stem rose out, and asked, like a little boy almost, if he could have his picture taken next to a portrait of President Clinton with Xiaolin. We had Xiaolin out to our house for an event in 2007, and then in 2009, I got an award for being a good citizen. Now, I am not an award guy. You could be doing something more positive with your time than receiving an award, but it gave me a chance to talk to 500 people about what I believe in, and that's what I'm talking to you all about today, and that is narrowing the painful gap between those of us who have so much and our brothers and sisters who have too little. And so I decided to go back, and prior to the award, the award was given to 5 of us. One was John Wooden, the basketball coach at UCLA, another Cecil Davis from Glide Memorial Church, a wonderful woman from Phoenix, Arizona, who was called the Mother Teresa of Phoenix for her work with the homeless in Phoenix. And the other person happened to be my kind of favorite guy. He was a fellow from North Carolina who, when Katrina happened, he purchased a circus tent, went down and erected it in Mississippi, stayed there for 2 years, and served 1 million free meals to the poor people in Mississippi. the financially poor people in Mississippi who were so terribly affected by Katrina. So he made an extraordinary difference. The presenter of the awards was Senator Robert Dole, and prior to the award ceremony for somewhere over 500 people, there was a small reception, and they made it very clear and very apparent to the five of us that we each got one guest. And so, of course, I wanted to bring my wife, and so I went to the leadership of the convention and said, look, I'd like to ask a favor. I'd like to have a special guest. And they said no. And I said, wait a second, you don't understand. I don't take no too easily, to be very honest with you. You don't quite understand. This young girl has been through this and this and this and this. And after they listened, they said, of course, bring her along. So Zhao Lin was my honored guest at this very small reception to meet Senator Dole, who, as we all know, ran for president of the United States. We walked into the room, and there was Senator Dole sitting kind of by himself, and so I took the opportunity to escort Zhao Lin over. And if you realize it or not, Senator Dole's right hand is completely immobile and completely unusable. So he shakes hands with his left hand. So I put my right hand into his left hand and said, Senator Dole, it's an honor to meet you, and I want to introduce you to one of my life's heroes, Zhao Lin. And he stuck out his left hand to her, and she tends to hold her hands behind her back because they are very unsightly. But she took her hand out and put her hand in his hand, and he looked at her and he said, oh, he said, you've got a hand problem too. What happened to you? And she said, well, I was burned. And he said, well, you know, mine happened in the war. He said, you can do a little bit with that hand, can't you? And she said, yes, I can do a little bit. He said, how's your other hand? And so she pulled out her other hand and put it in his hand. He said, oh, that one too, huh? He said, you know, my left hand looks pretty good. He said, but it's darn near worthless because I can't do buttons with it, and I can't do zippers, and I can't do buckles because I have no nerves in it. So the hand is nearly useless. And then he looked her straight in the eye and said something I'll never forget. He looked her straight in the eye and he said, Zhao Lin, I did pretty damn well with two bad hands. He said, you're going to do even better. So I have this wonderful picture of her next to Senator Dole. And what I like to think of on a regular basis is that this young peasant Chinese girl went from this condition in a peasant village 12 hours east of Chengdu, China, and in less than 5 years later, she was standing next to a man who ran for president of the United States. And I will tell you in this room right now, every one of you young people, that anything is possible. You will only be limited by yourself. You can do whatever your dreams are, and frankly, you can do it probably more easily in America than any other country because of the countries I've traveled in, which is quite a few. There is probably more opportunity in America than any other country that I've been in. So we are blessed to be here. Zhao Lin is now a straight-A student and graduating from high school near Washington, D.C. She's been adopted with the blessing of her parents in China by Brecken and Bill. And she's now selecting her various colleges and has already started an NGO which will address the needs of burned children. We had a small reception for her in our home and winery in California. And we showed a little bit of a film clip of her progress and what she's gone through to get to where she is right now. And then we introduced her, and she walked down the center aisle, and there was about 60 people in the winery, and she turned around. She said, I want to thank you for assisting with the finances needed for my medical care. And I want to tell you that I go to bed every night, and I pray that other children who have received horrible injuries like myself could be as lucky as I have been. So she's something that we can model our own lives after. And when we get to feel that we've been defeated or that we are not doing as well as we should or that life has given us probably a negative turn and a negative twist, we can remember back on those people with this extraordinary resolve that have overcome these obstacles. Don't let an obstacle get in your way. As I was telling the table over here and then the young honor guard that I spoke with briefly, there are obstacles out there, but I've got a little advice for you regarding an obstacle. If your intent and motivation is good, and if you are searching to do something that is right, and something that is proper, and is something that is good for our world, you can either go over that obstacle, you can go around that obstacle, and if you can't do either of those, you can go through that obstacle. Don't let anything stop you if your motivation and your intent is to make it a better world or you a better person.